Hi, everybody. My name is Matt Abedi. I was a performer at the Magnet Theater for 10 years. And I just want to do a YouTube channel where I talk about improv. So that's what this is. What's it called? Today, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite improv formats because one of the more popular videos that I put up was about how to do a Spokane. Um, and I think the other videos I've done have been pretty popular. Were like the monoscene one, which is impressive because monoscene is not a popular improv format, and then the pinata, which I think more teams should do, and I don't think a lot of theaters teach a pinata, um, and it's such a cool format. And there's lots of things that you can do to the pinata to mess with it. In any case, if improv formats are interesting to y'all, you can check those videos out on my channel. If you have other formats that you're interested in, I think some people are interested in learning more about like the Herald or deconstruction or whatever. Like I'm happy to do that too. I forgot who gave me the feedback, but the fan was worrying in the last video. I think there was another video, or maybe it was the same one, that like I was kind of whispering, and it was because it was late at night and I didn't want to wake up anybody else in my house, but I still want to get the videos out. But I will try to make sure that I'm doing more of the videos where I'm like at full volume, at full pep, because I imagine they're a whole lot more fun to listen to. Anyway, and I prefer doing those videos more because yeah, they're just like more fun to do, and I get to be fully expressive. So today we're going to be talking about the peel. The peel is a format I think a lot more teams should do, especially if you're like in your first like 2 to 4 years of doing improv. Doing a peel, I think, is like works out a whole lot of really important rudimentary improv muscles. And I'm a very, very big believer in like, I will always take a level one class. I will always take a level one class. That doesn't mean that every level one class I've learned from in a very big way, but I have definitely been in enough level one classes where I have learned something that I'm a big believer in, like the fundamentals. Like I've met so many improvisers where I think they do like one or two like really fundamental things so well that I mean, even sometimes like compensates for other places where they're lacking. Um, and the peel, I think, is one of those things, one of those improv formats where you really learn organic play because the format doesn't give you any off ramps or on ramps anywhere else, and kind of demands a lot of like situational awareness. Even though the format is very simple to get it like really juiced up and like going really well, there are a lot of like acting fundamentals and yes and fundamentals and organic play fundamentals that I think are really important. And even if you're like a really big, like I'm all into game and premise, and the only thing you want to do is like learn how to like very quickly get to jokes in the scene, I would say appeal is really great for those teams as well, especially if those teams like sometimes I think, especially again in those kind of more intermediate slash early years of learning game starts to feel really robotic and predictable, and teams who like fought really hard to develop like game muscles all of a sudden like feel kind of like stuck. And I think infusing a lot of organic play gets teams to be really inventive again, and then they can kind of apply their game skills in a secondary way. That's also like a personal philosophy thing. Like I think that like purely organic play can get so slow. And I've definitely witnessed that when I visited Chicago. I've sometimes seen these shows where it's like pretty compelling, but it's just like, you know, it's like 10 minutes of watching someone chew on a peach or something while they like deliver lines. You're like, well, that's it's cool, you know, but I also want to hear some jokes. And I've also had this opposite feeling where I've been at a UCB New York, UCB. I've never been to UCB LA, but UCB New York, or like a on the road UCB show, and I like can mentally just go like, oh, that's going to be the game. And like, you know, there's still some surprise because people play those games in very interesting ways, but it can sometimes feel a little formulaic. And so I think that having a balance of the light side and the dark side, and improv is a really great way to do that. And the peel, I think, is a really great way to strengthen the organic muscles. So in any case, today's video is going to be talking you through the peel, and I'm going to kind of talk about this in a couple sections. I'm going to talk about the structure of the peel, and then I'm going to tell you about some variations, some very common variations of how people do the peel. Then I'm going to talk about the goal of the peel. So whenever you're going into it, you're working on the format, like what are some things that you should kind of keep in the back of your mind is like, all right, this is what we're trying to do with this format. Or, you know, some of the things that like the format's unfriendly to. So I might have to like, you know, adjust my play a little bit. We're going to talk about the muscles that are worked, which will be pretty related to the goals there. And then we're going to give you a couple tips for teams giving this a try. And then finally, I'm going to give you 2 warm-up ideas that I think will kind of key a team in into like getting them moving in that right direction. Okay. The structure of the peel. The peel's kind of real, like one of the best things about the peel that I like and that I look for in an improv format is very simple. Very simple set of rules that set you up for really great scenes if you kind of fully are invested in the format. This is just like a personal side salad here is like, I kind of don't like stuff like the deconstruction where it's like these 2 scenes are like this and that scene is kind of like this and these scenes are based on that and blah blah blah, like too many things. I was on a team in New York that did a Cat's Cradle, and Cat's Cradle is relatively simple, but even still I would sometimes just get like so lost that my team kind of made fun of me for it. So it's one of the really big advantages of the peel. So here's how it starts. There's no opener typically to a peel. I wouldn't suggest one. And I would usually say, you know, ask for a suggestion of anything at all. And if you kind of want to make it a little bit easier on yourself, maybe you might think of like a theme, like, hey, give us a theme or like a big picture idea or something that has a little more heft to it. But I would say you don't have to do that because you can just kind of train yourselves in the monologue to to get yourself to that place. So suggestion of anything at all really works best. First scene is always first and last scene of a peel. Last scene, knock on wood, that you have enough time, because sometimes you don't. First scene of a peel is always a 1-person monologue. A couple tips about the monologue here. You should take whatever the suggestion is. You can give it a little A to C action. So what do I mean by A to C? Suggestion is turtle. Turtle makes me think of slow, makes me think of being stuck in traffic. So the suggestion is A, turtle. I took it to a place of B, slow. Then I took it to the third place, which is being stuck in traffic. Okay. So we can use one of our, I like to think of, you know, kind of your feelings in terms of a color wheel and what's it called? We can do the really basic, like black and white primary wheel color, which is like love or hate. Or we can do the like red, blue, green, whatever the 4 basic primary color of emotions are, which is happy, angry, sad, and scared. Okay, and the reason why we call these the primary emotions is because if you kind of mix them, you get like lots of different other feelings. So scared and happy is surprised. Happy and bored is like happy and sad is bored. Um, you know, starting from like love or hate, happy, angry, sad, scared, one of those 6 places usually will give you like a really great monologue to start with. By the way, little side salad, if you're also interested in doing stand-up comedy and you're working on like an early bit, one of the ways of kind of one of the tools you can use to infuse some life into your idea is pick one of those 6 and make sure you're on track with one of those things. It'll keep you from like kind of preaching, which sometimes stand-up folks do, by like infusing kind of that feeling and that emotion angle to it. You'll naturally get better stand-up material. But our goal in the monologue is not to do necessarily jokes or our type 5 or a stand-up routine. Our goal in this monologue is going to be essentially the goal of every player throughout the show. So in some of the warm-ups that I'm going to suggest, we're going to work on also the monologue. So pick, if the suggestion is turtle, we went from turtle to slow to being stuck in traffic. The monologue person can come out and go like, and I always like to, it's always funnier when you pick the more unexpected choice, I would say. So I suggest, moments like this, go on and be like, I kind of like traffic. And I personally do love traffic a little bit. Not too much, not when I'm like trying to go someplace, but like I put on some tunes. I hang in my car, and I used to smoke, and like I would run into traffic, and that would be like the smoking hour. That was, we're kicking up our feet. So um, that would be like or dislike, right? Or maybe you might even say like I picked happy as the emotion there. Another example might be someone suggests, let's use this example, pineapple. The pineapple, I don't know why pineapple is such a meme suggestion in improv. Pineapple being spiky and kind of having a little bit of like, I have a little bit of like armor as a person. Like I have a little, please leave me alone energy. I don't know what it is. Most people don't detect it on me, but I have it. I have it inside of me. It's like a sneaky kind of cactus sort of thing. Um, and I might play that with a little bit of anger, right? I might be like, yes, I am friendly. Please back off, which is kind of also kind of a fun premise. It's just like, I am secretly upset, and the more I have to be nice to you, the more upset I am on the inside. So these are 2 monologue ideas. Again, using that technique of picking one of those 6 starting points, 6-ish starting points, and using that. Other tip for the monologue is try to stay on track for that feeling and that topic. You can go off a little bit, have some fun with it, but it'll give the show kind of a more of a thematic niceness. But experiment with it. This is like a, I would say this is like a 15% suggestion. Okay. Now we're going to move into what sort of starts to give the peel its uniqueness. So at a certain point in the monologue, there are no swipes. There's no funky, normal, there aren't the normal editing tools in Appeal. So no one's going to run across the stage. What's going to happen is someone is going to walk onto the stage and or land. I would really say land somewhere on the stage. So because we don't want it to be like everyone who just kind of walks in, it makes the scenes one note. So if you're going to enter the scene, do it decisively. Grab the chair, land somewhere as if you had been there all along. Not to say you can't like open a door, walk in, or do anything like that. I'm just saying more often than not. Now that there are 2 people on stage, we have a totally new scene, and it's a 2-person scene. So the monologue, none of that exists to these 2 people. We are in a totally different place in space and time, and these 2 people are going to have a 2-person scene. That 2-person scene can really be about anything. You might have something you were thinking of, or the suggestions got in your mind, or something from the monologue, whatever it is. But you're going to do a brand new 2-person scene. Then, if a third person comes on to the scene, again, that person isn't just going to walk on; they are going to make a decisive entrance into the scene. And now we are outside of the two-person scene, and we are in a brand new three-person scene. Okay, and those people are going to be they're going to whatever the inspiration is of the person who walked in, we're going to follow that person's lead, and we're going to do that three-person scene. And a fourth person is going to walk on. We're going to have a four-person scene that's totally distinct. And a fifth person is going to walk on. We're going to have a five-person scene that's totally distinct, and so on and so forth. Okay. Let's say we have a 6 to 8 person team. Let's say it's a 6 person team, but you can do it to I would say I would recommend this for an 8 person team, because usually if you're doing a show, one person's going to be missing. 7 people makes it like a really nice peel. We're going to get up to that 7 person scene. We're going to do a full 7 person scene, whatever that looks like. Okay. And then we're going to ladder back down. So if one person exits, now we are back in our 6 person scene. If the next person exits, we are back in our 5 person scene, and then our 3 person scene, and then our 2 person scene. So we are always going to return to the scene that we had with the 2 people, with the 3 people, with the 4 people, with the 5 people. And then when we land on the monologue, we're going to go back to the same monologue that we were doing when we started the show. So if we were talking about how much we love traffic, the very last scene of the show, if we really stuck the landing on this, should be someone going, do I get into accidents? Yeah, but it's worth it to be in traffic and have a little piece to yourself, a little slice of heaven inside of your AC car, or whatever. Okay. So again, appeal works like this. We're going to have a monologue. Then we're going to have a distinct 2 person scene, a distinct 3 person scene, a distinct 4 person scene. We're going to go all the way up to all the players on the ensemble or the team are on stage. We're going to do a 7 person scene, and then we're going to peel back down. 6 person scene, 5 person scene, 4 person scene, 3 person scene, 1 person scene. So this is where it gets its name, peel. Also, whenever we're going back down, we want to make sure the exits are pretty distinct. Okay. So once that person leaves, leave the scene. I would say, like, decide amongst yourselves if someone dying means that they've left the scene. What's it called? That's that. You know, it is going to be a little one note, right, with people walking off. But also, this is the reason why we make sure those entrances aren't just people walking in. Okay. Let's see. All right. So yeah, that's the structure. That's the structure of appeal. Okay. A couple variations and common questions about the appeal. Number one is, do we scale straight up and then straight down, or can we kind of do a little bob and weave? If you have a smaller team and a larger time slot, you can do a little bobbing and weaving. So what do I mean by that? You can go up to 2 person scene, 3 person scene, back down to 2 person scene, back up to a 3 person scene, 4 person scene, 5 person scene, back down to a 4 person scene, back down to a 3 person scene. And then you might race all the way back down to 1, whatever it looks like. Okay. That's something you should decide on as a team. But I would say generally, if you've got, a 6 to 8 person team and you're playing with a 20 to 25 minute time slot, you'll be fine. If you're working with like a 15-minute slot and you've got about 4 people on that team, you'll probably be fine also. If you're working on a 25-minute slot, you might sit in those scenes longer. You might bounce around a little bit more. That's up to you. Something to work on in rehearsal and play around with and see what works for you. Okay. Second variation, common question is does it have to be the same people? Okay. So when we do the 2 person scene, the first time around, whenever we come back to the 2 person scene, does it have to be the exact same 2 people? Or when we're at the 5-person scene, is it the same 5 people as what we had whenever the first time we were at the five-person scene? Some teams do it strictly that way. Okay. Um, uh, that's that's up to you. One of the things that makes this format kind of not as like it kind of makes it like you know stiff is like that does mean whoever's in the 6-person scene is only in one scene for the whole show. And I think if you're doing lots of shows, then that person just kind of goes like, I'll have my time when the time comes, which is cool. The other way of doing it is you just kind of go like, whoever leaves. You do have to do a little bit of justifying, and it does make it so that, like, let's say, um, someone who was in the second, let's say, someone who was in the monologue decides to be the person who walks off on the sixth person on the 6-person 6-person scene. That means there's going to be that person missing for the rest of the show, right? And so that means whoever all the characters that person was playing, now we've got to either figure out like we've got to like kill them. They got to have to walk. They must have walked off. All that other stuff. Okay, not impossible to manage, but what's it called? Something to watch out for. But it also does do something fun, which is like now we might even have 2 totally different people who are in the 2-person scene, and they might go like, you know, who, like we were supposed to meet them like an hour ago, and they're not here. Like we came to the restaurant on like, are we crazy? Or and then whenever we get back to the monologue, once we're there, that person might be like, the guy next to me in traffic is having a real good time. It pisses me off, right? Or whatever, okay? So we can do it. We just have to be a little inventive about it. And we have to make it clear that we are back in the world, in a slice of time, in the space. And sometimes it works really well. Like I saw one where it was like the 2-person scene, or maybe, yeah, something like that. No, I think it was a 3-person scene. I think it was a 3-person scene, and it was a breakup scene, and the third person there was like their best friend or something, who was like, "Hey, I don't really need to be here for this," and they're like, "No, you've got to pick who your best friend is." So when one of those people didn't come back on stage, and there was a different third person on there, that different third person was like, "Oh, I'm not as important of a best friend as Kyle here." Like it was very, very funny, right? So don't be afraid. You will find all sorts of like goofy reasons, fun reasons why those people are missing. But we just want to return to the topic at hand, the scene, the slice of time, whatever was going on, the happening of that scene, and justify why certain players are gone and certain players are back. So, I will say having a different mix of players as you're stepping back down to the monologue does produce a lot of fun opportunities. You just really have to have your awareness antenna up. Okay. So those are the 2 really big variations. Like I said, there aren't a lot of component parts to the peels. There isn't a lot to tweak. But those are 2 things that you can play around with. If I had to say pick one of these to play around with, I would, especially if you're dealing with like we're a small team with a lot of time or whatever, I would lean towards scenes having different mixes of players because it does produce a little bit more inventiveness. And then I would lean against stepping up and down the ladder, and instead have scenes that are longer, that you kind of sit in those scenes for a bit more time. Okay. All right. So now we're going to talk about the goals of the peel for the ensemble, for the whole team. What do the goals look like for this group? One thing to think about is like we are really leaning into organic play more than we're leaning into games. It doesn't mean that we aren't going to have any games, but what I am going to say is like if you're going to try to do the formulaic scenes of like I am a fireman. You are the fire chief. We are at a pool hall, and we're playing pool or whatever. Those kinds of like robot game scenes. You're gonna you're gonna be doing a lot of heavy lifting without a big amount of payoff. So we're gonna talk about what some of the organic play components that will make this format really sing work. But, you know, our focus is going to be about character point of view, about emotion, about perspective, about like scene dynamics more than it's going to be about like, this is a guy where every time he presses button, he farts and it makes him cry or whatever. That's such a cartoonish, that is such a brutal and mean interpretation of what game looks like. But, and I do like playing game a lot. Everyone will say that I am really, really gamey, but, what's it called? If you're kind of, if you're going to feel like you're shoehorning it in this format. So I would say the goal is to play as organically as possible and to discover game opportunities more than to like attack the scene with a perspective of like, where's the game and why is this funny? Okay. Second thing we want to have in our peel are like distinct stage pictures. Okay. What do I mean by that? If it's two people just standing side by side, and then it's three people standing side by side, and then it's four people standing side by side, all like this, you are not going to have dynamic stage pictures. You're not going, the show will feel very one note. Okay. So use the chairs, lean up against the wall, have an expression on your face, squat down on the floor, um, get down on all fours, whatever. Make sure you're making big physical choices, right? Part of that is it does a really clear job to the audience and to your other teammates to let everyone know something distinct is going to happen. So if we're doing a scene like this, we're both like standing there, we're detectives standing over a body, and then a third person, what's it called? What's it called? Gets down on all fours and goes like, I think an earthquake is coming, right? That tells us we're in a totally different scene, right? Because there's no more dead body there. We're now like, there's one person on their knees like this. Or if one person, what's it called, is sitting in a chair and goes like, hey guys, come on, get in the car, right? We now have a very distinct, like everything physically about the scene has to move around to accommodate what the new happening is, okay? This also produces a really great opportunity when you're laddering back down the peel, because when someone exits, no one's going to be choosing where their body is going to be. And all of a sudden, you know what I mean? If like three of us are like laying on our backs and we're back in the detective scene, someone could just be like, yeah, so if I was dead here, I could stare up at this wall for like 6 or 7 hours. This guy might have bled out on the floor, actually. We have to do the justification move of why we're now in this new physical position and we're in that scene. So part of the magic of appeal is making big physical choices, making big stage choices. So we could walk all the way up to the lip of the stage and be really close. We could walk all the way to the back. We could pop out of the side. Whatever the space looks like, utilize it as much as you possibly can, because it will give you a dynamic sense of what the scene is, where the couch is, where the armoire is, where all sorts of things are. And it will make characters make bigger physical choices. And whenever we go back to those scenes, we'll have to like do a little justification, right? So if we have to go back to the scene where we were in a car and we're all standing around, we would be like, so the car's broken down, right? That explains why we're all now standing, right? So in any case, we want to make sure each scene starts off with a big physical choice. So that person who comes in, you didn't just walk in, you You made a choice. You made a big physical choice that let everyone know that something totally new is happening, a new scene is happening. And then whenever we're coming back down, that each new physical like arrangement that we are in, right? Because as soon as that person leaves, we're back in the 2-person scene or the 3-person scene or whatever the step down is. That now we have to explain why we're in this new physical posture. Okay. Third goal of appeal is to make sure your exits are meaningful. So we talked about entrances. Entrances and exits have to be meaningful. I should put it that way, right? So those entrances have to be distinct and have to inject a totally new physical posture and tell us something dynamic is happening. So what's it called? If someone lands and they're knitting, right? There is some significance to the knitting. Okay. If someone pretends, I saw this once in a show, a guy started the scene laying down and then on his belly and then crawled up like this. And he was like, he basically, I think he said that he had just crawled out of the ocean or something. Like he had just jumped out of the water or the lake or something like that. That is a very meaningful entrance, right? Because it's not just someone appeared, it's that someone who has to now take off scuba gear and unzip or whatever has to explain why they came out of the water. Same thing with an exit. So if you're walking out the door, if you're leaving, if whatever happens, what's it called? Let's make sure that it moves the scene forward or it's connected in some very big way. Yeah, yeah. And like I said, the exits will feel a little one note, but they don't have to be. So it doesn't always have to be like, I'm out of here. It can also be someone who'll be like, I will be right back. Or like, oh, my toaster strudel's ready. You can kind of walk out the door or whatever. Okay. Last thing. We talked a little bit about game. What you will have is callbacks and connections will happen. Okay. What do I mean by that? So in scene, let's say we're talking about the traffic scene, we make it up to like the 6-person scene. It is perfectly fine for us by the 6-person scene to be like 6 truckers who are like, wow, I can't believe we all smashed into each other. And now all this glue is like stopped everything on the 405. It's like, ooh, we are going to lose our jobs over this one or whatever. A big callback to the guy who likes being in traffic. Or you might bend time a little bit. So maybe in the 4-person scene, we see the murder that the 2 detectives are investigating in the 2-person scene, or maybe they were they're serial killers or whatever. Right. So, I feel like I feel like I'm gonna find out that I'm getting demonetized on YouTube or something for all these scenarios that I'm coming up with. They're all like gruesome. Oh well, that's my sense of humor, I guess. In any case, um, they don't need to be organic in the sense that like if it only comes up naturally, you can do it. But I would say like keep them as organic as possible. And if you find little moments where like what's it called? Like that earthquake moment where in that 6-person scene, and it's a bunch of people who are like, there's no way there's an earthquake hitting. I bet you $50. And then the other person goes like $60, blah, 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 blah. They keep going, whatever else. What's it called? That's a fine. That's a fine. That's one of the goals, right? As long as it's not like a total replay of another scene, but it like tips the hat to or gives a nod to or tells us that some character kind of like exists in the same world but not in the same time or space or whatever, that's all good. Okay. Some muscles that are worked. This is the next section we're going to talk about. So these are some of the muscles that are worked. And we're going to start with this thing. The last video that I did was on doing group scenes. And if you listen to what I said, you'll probably be like, well, Matt, like by like 5 or 6 people or 7 people, like we're in group scene territory. Like it's gonna be hard to not do more group scene kind of stuff. And the answer to that is kinda. It depends on how you approach them. So you can do a peel where the largest scene, where all the players are maxed out, works like a group game. I've seen it like that. I've also seen teams that work on mono scene techniques, and I have a video about mono scene work, where we really focus in on how to pass focus and all be in the same scene at the same time. Okay. In my last video, when I was talking about group games, I was really just talking about, like, especially group games in a jam setting or with new players or just like kind of the basics. But if you're in a team that practices regularly, I would say like a peel can have 2 or 3 mono scene ish, like starts to a mono scene in them. Okay. So you can treat the 5-person, 6-person, 7-person, even 8-person scenes more like a mono scene where we're passing focus, we're talking about things, where things are kind of happening in a very theatrical way, which you have to be very, very, very patient. Okay. Next thing is, we talked about this a whole lot. We're really going to be focusing in on organic play. Okay. So a big part of the peel is going to be really being connected with your scene partner and having a strong read on their like posture, tone of their voice, their motivation, who they are as a person. All of this stuff is really, really important in organic play, because the dynamic between the two characters is really what's going to be driving the scene and will help you discover kind of more like character scenic games than you would like kind of more mechanical games. Second muscle work is physical scene work, and this is something that I think is so important and extremely overlooked. And partially it's because I think whenever people are doing improv early on, you're still like for a while, I would say for years, for some improvisers, you're still managing the feeling of being embarrassed or doing kind of like an embarrassing thing on stage. Look, improv is not cool. I will die on this hill. I'm a very, very big believer in this. Okay. And that's great. I'm not a big believer in doing cool stuff all the time. Okay. I'm not. I like Magic the Gathering. Magic the Gathering is fun. I think it's cool, but I know generally mainstream everybody, it's not cool. Okay. You have to be vulnerable and a little geeky, a little bit dorky to be a full grown adult and play pretend. It's really good for you, right? It will make you a better person. I 100% believe improv will make you a better person. For all sorts of reasons. I'm not going to go. That's a whole nother rant. Maybe I'll do it for another thing. Actually, one more side salad thing. I think improv is so good for you that if you have trouble dating, improv will do well for you. Improv will work wonders for you. Not, and I don't mean in like the like sense that like, oh, now all your dates will turn into people who are like in love with you or whatever. It will make you better at improv. It will make you better at dating in the sense that you will have a greater awareness of what's happening scene wise with that person in this moment. And then you'll also have moments where you'll be like, oh, this person's not a good listener, or like this person's just like on something, or like I'm not doing well in this on this date, and that's fine. That's like, we're just not vibing for whatever reason. And improv does that for you, because you'll be a really great improviser, and then you will meet somebody that you and that person do not mesh, and you have no idea why, and you will eventually figure it out with time. But I've been on teams with people where I'm like, that person's good, I'm good. Every time we do a scene, it's like we are tripping over ourselves trying to figure out what the heck's going on. Again, those are fewer far between as you get a lot better and you get more like reps and you have a greater understanding. And I also have that now in my professional life, my dating life, everywhere, because I feel like I have a greater awareness of what's going on. Um, and that greater awareness is tied to improv in a very big way. Okay, but back to what we were talking about. That was a real side salad. Um, Physical scene work means flapping your wings and playing a bird. It means playing a statue. It means doing something that like an audience member will at first be like, why is this person doing this? But more importantly, they'll be like, this guy's funny. And this person is willing to like take that level to make me laugh. And that's awesome. Okay. So, um, make those physical choices, right? Sit in your chair in a funny way. Stick your leg on the chair and strike a pose like a captain. Crawl around like a gremlin. Okay, lose yourself in it. Appeal is going to reward that like no one's business, but it is really going to punish somebody who kind of does this and like you kind of like are stiff straight up and down like a board. Okay, so take the peel as an opportunity to make those big physical choices. And I would say generally in improv, you know, the more you can let go of the idea that you need to be cool or that like your character always needs to be a character with dignity, um, you're gonna have more fun. um, it do be like that. All right, the next muscle that is worked is tracking. As you can tell, there can be 8 unique scenes, 6 of which you might be in, and you have to have a strong understanding of what's going on. Okay, so you have to track what's happening in each one of those scenes, and you have to have a clear awareness of where people are and what we were talking about, what the game was. That means having a lot of focus. Unlike a herald where you can do your scene and then you're on the back line until it's your turn to do a group game or your scene again. Or you only need to memorize one other person's scene because you want to do a move on their scene and then you just want to go back to doing your thing or whatever. Okay. But because there's kind of a group ownership as you're leveling up and even as you're leveling down, even if you're not in that scene and your teammates forget what scene they're in, from the back line, you can give them a hint, right? So we're back down to the 2-person scene. It's 2 people who were not originally in the two-person scene, and they're blanking on what the 2-person scene was. Someone from off stage can essentially be like, "Hey, you 2 detectives, are you still right?" So everyone is responsible for every scene, and everyone has to kind of track where we are, what we were talking about in that scene, and what was going on. Okay, that is something that is not just important in appeal, but will be important if you're doing a constellation, if you're doing a cat's cradle, if you're doing a 4-track, if you're doing even like a herald. I would say like a really great herald team, you track every scene, and it makes you really good at callbacks and third beats. If you're doing a pinata, I mean, I'm trying to think of other formats. This would be a deconstruction for sure. There's so many freaking scenes. Um, uh, Maybe even a JTS Brown, but I feel like I always confuse what a JTS Brown is, or a slacker, like, or a Laronde. Um, so in any case, um, um, tracking scenes, very important. Last muscle that's really worked is making big emotional choices. Okay. Um, Being a talky, thinky person in this format makes the show kind of one note. But if you charge into a scene and you go, you won't believe what has just happened, will inject each new scene with a totally new dynamic. And the thing that the peel really relies on is that the breaks in between those scenes, because we don't have a wipe, that the lines, the physicality, the emotional choices, all that stuff are really strong. And it's why the monologue is built the way that the monologue is built, with kind of a big emotional perspective at the very, very top. We want to kind of supercharge the show with this feeling. And we want each scene after to have not just the same feeling, but a major feeling, another human perspective on whatever is going on. You should do that always in all scenes, in all shows, but because the peel literally goes, all right, well, that scene's over. You know, your 2-person scene is going to be completely different from your 3-person scene, and there might be some thematic connections and callbacks, but unlike like a close quarters where there's always a tiny little thread, or an evente where there's a tiny little thread of something else that happened earlier in the show that you can pull on, or even a herald where you can pull from the opening. You don't get that same benefit with appeal. So we've got to be big and snappy with our feelings, our physical choices, and we have to be kind of communicative in that way. Okay. All right. Tips for giving the appeal a try. And you know what? I'm going to mix these with the warm-ups because I think that they'll be really connected. And I feel like I repeated myself a little bit during the muscles and the goal part. And these videos, I don't know, guys, I really blab. This one's even longer than the last one. All right. Okay. So some tips. And I'll connect these to the warm-ups. So first warm-up idea is to play Tree Nut Squirrel. It's one of my favorite games to play. Very, very simple. One person comes out and goes, I'm a tree. And they say it out loud and they strike a pose like a tree. Next person goes, I'm a nut. And maybe they crouch down to the ground and they put themselves inside this little like nut. And the third person goes, I'm a squirrel. And a fourth person will pick one of those 3 elements that stays. So someone might say the nut stays. And then the person who says the nut stays, sorry. One person will say the nut stays. Then the next person will be like, I'm a nutcracker, right? And they will stand next to the nut, and maybe they'll, be a nutcracker. And another person will come in and they'll go like, I'm a present. And the next person in line will say the present stays. And so on and so forth. So we're always going to produce 2 objects that we could imagine that are side by side with the object that started us off there. And then the fourth person will always pick one that stays, and then we're going to move on and add. We're going to kind of restart the set. Okay. This gets us primed to make big physical choices, to get us out of our heads, to move around our bodies. And also the group will naturally start to giggle a little bit, right? Because someone will like play a squirrel and we'll all like giggle a little bit. And you'll notice that like not every funny improv move is like a joke you wrote on stage. Sometimes it's just being a squirrel on stage. Sometimes it's as simple and as fun as like, and being an adult who's having fun. You can add another layer to Tree Nut Squirrel where, what's it called? Once we have 3 objects, the tree nut and the squirrel, let's say we had a present, and then one object is like a person who's accepting the present, who's a little like reluctant, who's like, oh no, I don't like this present. And the third is like, I don't know, a YouTube camera or something. I don't know. A ring light. What's it called? We'll take a moment and see that scene. So we'll just like have it play out a little bit where someone will be like, oh my God, thanks you guys who are my subscribers for this gift. I still really love Pokemon, even though I'm a 45-year-old man or whatever. Okay. And we'll see that scene kind of go on. And then once again, someone will edit that scene by going, the YouTube camera stays. And the next person goes like, I'm a blank and I'm a blank. And then once we have those 3 objects, we start a new scene. Okay. So Tree Nut Squirrel, and then we're going to scale those up to the scenes. That'll get us used to making big physical choices and starting kind of quote from scratch or from a physical or emotional place. Okay. The big tip there is, what's it called? be unafraid of objects in scene work. They're usually going to ground your scene work in a very, very big way. I'm not like a comedy genius. I'm not a scene writing genius, but having to come up with three objects that would be in the same space kind of got my mental juices going of like, who would be accepting a gift and there'd be a YouTube camera around, right? Um, what's it called? Uh, uh, just seeing the canvas of a scene and taking a moment of like where things might be, even in your own head. So even without calling them out, you can kind of just be like, I think a submarine is right there. Like, why would a submarine be there? Or why would these two people be like right next to each other or really far apart from each other or whatever? That can be a way of being present in the moment, and rather than like being deep in your own head about like what the right joke is or what the right move is, what a funny idea would be or what a premise would be. Okay. Second thing is, second exercise is, uh, um, get people in two rows. Okay. The person on the left shows up in the scene and they make, without making any sounds or whatever, they make a big emotional choice. So, or whatever, and a big physical choice. So they could be sitting, standing, leaning, on the ground, on their belly doing this thing, um, or whatever. And the other person, I want you to take a big guess as to the emotional state of that person. So you might be like, are you flirting with boys on the phone, right? If they're on their belly and they're like this, and you go, no. Um, or what's it called? Someone who's like doing, kind of panicking, and it's like, did you pierce a hole in the submarine? And then you go, and then that person goes, no. And they're like, there's water pouring down from that finger. Move your finger, and you move the finger, and it's whoosh, water falls down. Um, um, Taking those big physical positions and being like, are you embarrassed? Are you hiding something? So the person on the left, big emotional choice with their face, their body, big physical choice. The second person, you can be body neutral. Okay, you can just stand straight up and down. But what I want you to do is observe what you're seeing, the behavior, the mannerisms, the emotion, everything out of the other person, and take a big swing. You don't have to do it immediately. You don't have to do it very quickly, but take a moment with yourself, look at that person and go like, are you mad at me? And pro tip, the answer is yes. The answer is always yes. Maybe if it's so distinct that they're wrong, okay, fine. But the answer is yes. Okay. And we're going to be off to the races with that scene. So the tip there is at the top of every scene, remember we're starting from zero. Okay. So take a beat, take a moment. And I think in this warm up, it's really important and it's very helpful and valuable for people to see that, like, if you take that beat, nobody notices. But if you make a rushed choice, now you're stuck with a rushed choice and you'll have to fix it. And you can always fix it. It's not the worst thing ever. But if you take a beat to fully consume, digest what the other person is doing, just for a split second or whatnot, let your intuition jump out and go like, I think I know what's going on here, or I feel like I have a sense of what's up. And taking a big swing will produce really big and powerful results, right? You'll also notice that your game moves, your sense of what those characters are, what their character or behavioral dynamics are, will more organically show up as that person justifies their behavior, their emotional state, their physical state, whatever that looks like. Okay. So those are the two the two really big warm up ideas, and they're kind of related tips. The last tip, is this really a good tip? You know, yeah. Well, I mean, why not? What is this? This video's already almost an hour. Who's listening to this? Um, Someone has to be listening to this. Maybe not. Oh my god. But you know what? I'm gonna leave it there. I think that tip's like good for another video or something else. Big thing is give this format a try. Let me know what you think of it. If you have any follow-up questions, Like I said, it's a really great way of like I think strengthening your organic play, but I also think it's a great way of expanding people who are feel like they have a grasp of game, are able to play game with some speed, and are looking to kind of like broaden and expand everything that's possible whenever they're playing game in their game scenes, or to add kind of more theatrical element. Hit the like button, subscribe, leave a comment, engagement, share this with your improv teammates, and all that stuff, be like, oh, this cool fun guy, he's so fun and cool, he's talking about improv, and he answers questions. And again, if you have any topics or things you want to hear about, I'm just kind of riffing. I'm riffing. All right, bye y'all.